Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Inspired Radio. I'm Helen Taylor, and I'm here with you every Wednesday, 10 a.m. for Melbourne, Australia time, and Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central Time for Canada and US, for conversations and stories to inspire you. This is the BBS Radio TV platform, and we're going live to 200 plus outlets worldwide. Before I get started, I would like to just firstly say to our sponsors, every one of you that sponsors the show, thank you, thank you, thank you. Inspired Radio is all about change and getting uncomfortable and shaking up the status quo that we've got out there. We're breaking free from limiting systems and limiting lives and embracing our infinite potential. My guests are here to tell their story because storytelling is creating a new world. So let me introduce today's guest, Nicole Bijlsma. She is building biology. She's a leading voice in environmental health and the healthy homes movement in Australia. A former naturopath and acupuncturist, Nicole brings over 3 decades of clinical research and teaching experience to her pioneering work in building biology, exploring how our homes impact our health, anything from mould to allergens to electromagnetic fields and toxic exposures. She's the best-selling author of Healthy Home, Healthy Family, founder of the Australian College of Environmental Studies, and a sought-after expert whose work bridges the gap between environmental science and everyday well-being. Today, we'll be diving into whatever makes the home truly healthy and what we can do to create safe living spaces for ourselves. Wow, Nicole, welcome.
Very nice to be here and be interviewed by you again.
Right. Well, firstly, let me say you've reinvented yourself a few times there, right? What's been driving you?
That's a great question. It started in year 10. I remember looking through the career guide at high school and going, there's not much here that I can relate to that I would want to be. And then I came across naturopath and I went, that's what I want to be. I want to be like a doctor, but not prescribe pharmaceuticals. I want to figure out what's causing cancer, which was a big goal, pretty naive, because a few of my parents' friends had been diagnosed and passed away with cancer at the time that I was 16. And I thought, it always felt within my core, there's always a reason why people get sick. So I wanted to explore that. And I started to look at Bernard Jensen's work, who was a famous naturopath in the US, who did a lot of colonic irrigation and gut work,
Yep.
which of course we now realize is, especially the gut microbiome is key to health.
Yes.
And yeah, I was just obsessed about it. I was obsessed with the C word, the cancer word. So
And a
I
little bit
thought,
ahead of the curve too, by the sounds of it, right? You were sort of seeing, that there was something ahead for you, some sort of solutions for people, and asking all the right questions.
it was. And look, when I started naturopathy straight out of school, there were two 18-year-olds, me and one other girl, and the rest were in their 30s to 60s. There was a class of
Wow.
70, and there's only two of us who were 18 doing the course. But it just felt, to me, there's always a reason why people get sick. And that's really motivated me throughout my life, both in my own health journey and in my patients.
Mm, yes. Yes, we need to be passionate about something, don't we? Because it just pulls us into the future. Okay. So, gosh, where do we start, love? Where do we start? You know, I've been looking at your website, and to everyone listening, we're going to be putting those details with the show notes, because I love how you've got your 10 tips for people. I know that on your website, you've got people can just click on a few things, and there's descriptions, there's insight for everybody. But, where do we start? Like, let's start with 5G, because I know that 6G's right coming up right along behind it. Let's talk about 5G. What is it to you?
Well, man-made electromagnetic fields are very different to the terrestrial radiation we've evolved on. So regardless of what generation of electromagnetic field it is, I think it's really important to look at what did we evolve on? We need to look at baseline. What's the natural radiation that we've evolved on that is essential for biological life and life in general? And that's the sun's energy and of course the Earth's magnetic field, the Schumann resonance that exists in the atmosphere at any given time because of the lightning strikes happening throughout the planet. So the understanding that we've evolved, that we are electrical beings. We're not chemical factories like the pharmaceutical industry want us to believe. We're electrical beings. The spark is happening early in utero, and there's, electric voltage across all the cell membranes. So once you understand what we've evolved and what it takes to have life, not just water, not just bacteria, but electricity, then you understand what the baseline is for health.
Yeah.
When you start masking and adding, huge orders of magnitude of man-made electromagnetic fields that are very different to the terrestrial radiation we've evolved on. So we have, radio frequencies in particular that impact the cell membrane and cause an influx in calcium ions into the cell that results in oxidative stress, etc. So we know what's happening at a cellular level, and this indirectly can cause ionizing DNA strand breaks, etc., and increased risk for cancers, not in the same way as ionizing radiation, but in a different way, leading to the same outcome. So the problem with man-made electromagnetic fields is they're modulated. They're carrying information on a wave. You don't find that in nature. They're alternating current. They're not direct current going in one direction. So this modulation and this high variability is something our cells were not designed to deal with. And what the Russian research has shown is that it has long latency periods. So, a lot of the brain tumors, we're looking at 15 to 25 years latency period, like asbestos, before adverse health effects show. But at a cellular level, it's showing very, very early on before it ends up in this chronic disease manifestation.
But it makes it very difficult to be able to trace back and go, that's the cause, because there's lengthy duration.
Long latency periods. This is the problem with the medical model at the moment. It's focused so much on diagnostic boxes, which are not helping most people in chronic illness. For acute diseases, brilliant. Let's face it. Medicine is incredible in acute diseases, but for chronic disease management, it's really failing miserably. And the reason is because they're teaching people on diagnostic boxes, not what's happening at a cellular level.
Yep.
When you start looking at a cellular level, there's a very particular pathway that's followed from hormesis, where the cell is, adapting to environmental onslaughts, etc., but gets back to a state of balance. When that is overwhelmed because there's too much stress, too much environmental triggers, poor diet, all these other things, genetics, nutrition, etc., coming on board, you have this eventual degradation into chronic illness. And the chronic illness pathway is very different to just giving someone a diagnostic box. You really need to understand what are all the triggers that are causing this low-grade inflammation that's ultimately leading to most of us living longer but being sicker.
My gosh, everybody, can you hear? I've just pushed a button of passion. Like this woman, it just comes out. You love this stuff, and I love listening to the passion that you have for it. But what I'm hearing is, like, for the layman people out there, chronic is long term. That's long term, right? And really, what 5G and electromagnetic waves are causing is a system interrupt or disrupt in our bodies. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I was to simplify, it's almost like it's tricking the body into thinking it's daytime instead of nighttime. So having a man-made electromagnetic fields, any Wi-Fi enabled devices, smart meters, cell phones in your bedroom is exposing you to man-made EMFs that are suppressing melatonin. Melatonin is the most important anti-cancer hormone we have in the body. And guess what every kid is on now with neurodevelopmental disorders? They're all on melatonin. We've completely affected our exposure to these radio frequencies that are suppressing the most important anti-cancer hormone that we have. Now, melatonin, in fact, I bought a book about it about 10 years ago. It was 400 pages long on the functions of melatonin and melatonergic drugs. And it was all about how it sets our circadian rhythm, how it sets our reproductive cycle, like when children, as they mature, when their melatonin drops, that's when a woman's menstrual cycle starts.
Hormones.
So we know the menstrual cycle is starting a lot earlier than before. There are several reasons why they think this is so, including the introduction of microplastics and endocrine disrupting chemicals in many products, but also the exposure to man-made EMFs would, I suspect, would also be playing a role.
Yep.
And of course, menstrual cycles in the 1900s, the average woman started her menses at 16. Now they're starting as young as 7 and 8, with
Oh,
the average around 11, which is dramatic change, which is a dramatic increased risk for breast cancer, which now affect 1 in 8 women in Australia.
that's
It
alarm
is
bell. That's huge
huge.
alarm bells all on its
Yep,
own, isn't it? And we need to get
absolutely.
people paying attention, right? I
We
didn't
do.
realize that
I mean,
melatonin was such a
yep.
big player.
Mm.
So, but most people, because the industry, the medical industry knows, or pharmaceutical industry knows. So now that's why melatonin, synthetic melatonin, is such a big seller.
Absolutely. And what we should be doing is first creating environments that support melatonin, which is, a dark room, a cooler room, 18 degrees is ideal, no man-made electromagnetic fields in that room or adjacent rooms, not sleeping near a meter panel, not having your cell phone in the room, not having any Wi-Fi enabled device, really creating the ideal conditions for sleep. Sleep is the hallmark of health.
Yeah.
Without sleep, in fact, almost every mental illness has sleep disturbances as part
Right.
of its.
Yes, yes, you're
Most
right.
chronic diseases do. Yeah,
It's vital to get your sleep, good sleep. So, what you're talking about is don't put your phone in the room with you, turn your Wi Fi off at night, right? Don't have any of the devices going at all for at least 8 hours.
exactly right. Yep. And that does require you turning off the smart meter and extenders, boosters, routers at night time. Preferably, look, I don't like them at all because the power output is so high. That's why you
Right.
can get internet connectivity in the neighbor's house from your router or your backyard. They're
Yep.
designed to be, to be quite high in terms of their emissions. So I think, yeah, best to hardwire. And if that's not an option,
Yes.
then to at least turn it off. Even have a clock timer on it at night so it automatically turns off, at a certain time. So
Yep.
people likely get a restful sleep. But EMFs affect people many ways. So melatonin, we've looked at oxidative stress and inflammation. It also enhances the permeability of the blood-brain barrier. So whatever toxins or mold you have in your body, you're pretty much giving it a free pass into the central nervous system. And that's a problem. Our toxic load has dramatically increased since the Industrial Revolution, but in particular, since changes in farming practices in the 50s and 60s with the introduction of the organic chlorine pesticides and DDT,
Yep.
which is still breaking down in our soils, which is still being passed from one generation to another
Mm.
because it doesn't come out of the body. It's lipophilic. It stays in the fat. It goes into the breast milk. It's
Mm.
like, so we are paying the price of this now with an pandemic of children's neurodevelopmental disorders.
Yep.
Two of my kids have ADHD. It's the autism was virtually non-existent in 1950s. The ones
Oh, so you're saying it's associated to ADHD and autism?
I'm saying the chemicals,
Yes.
so I've sort of jumped into the chemical side of things. There is a growing body of evidence to indicate that there are chemical exposures, including pesticides, including toxic metals, that could be increasing the risks for these neurodevelopmental disorders. If you look at the impact of these pesticides on a unborn fetus and in children, and these pesticides in the elderly, what we're seeing is neurodevelopmental disorders, ADHD, potentially autism in children, and we're seeing dementia and Parkinson's in the elderly. So there's compelling evidence that these chemicals cause Parkinson's in the elderly, which is virtually non-existent in the 60s. There's only two
Gosh. And,
papers
and
on it.
for people that are listening out there, I remember going to a doctor who was very alternative. Zenon Gruber was just such a wonderful man. And he diagnosed the pesticides in me, and that was in my late 50s. And I was surprised to think, like I didn't hang around orchards and the farms and things when I was a child. They were still in my system, and here we were 5 decades later. So, yes. Yes, they're latently in everyone.
Absolutely. And look, when the effect, they're across the globe. I mean, they found them in the livers of polar bears, even though spraying it had occurred 15,000 kilometres away
Wow.
because of global distillation and wind flow. When you spray in one part, it affects all parts. And of
Yep.
course, DDT is still used for malarial control in some Asian countries. So we are still being exposed, and these chemicals during critical windows of development, especially in certain times of the pregnancy, can have dramatic impacts on the outcome of that child later on in their life.
Oh. And what I'm hearing is that we are really just toxic, you know, rubbish bins, really. We're getting it worse and worse. How do we, you're talking about the home in terms of what to do with EMFs. How do we do it with our bodies? How do we clean it up?
It's a good question. So it really comes back to making informed choices about the products that you buy. So
Mm.
let's start with, personal care products and cleaning products, really going back to basics. Do we really need to use sanitizers and bleaches and antibacterials in the home? No. The research is showing some of the healthiest populations don't have any chemicals, including the Amish and communities that have virtually no asthma, no allergies, very low rates of neurodevelopmental disorders in their kids.
Yep.
And that could be due to other reasons as well, including their vaccine or lack of vaccine program.
Well, I think
Um,
7 years ago, I opened up the kitchen cupboard, I opened up the laundry cupboard and the bathroom cupboard, and I went on a real like focus of cleaning it up and getting back to basics. And I now people are surprised when they look in those cupboards because there's only two or three products in there, right? And yeah, I encourage everybody to do exactly what you're saying. Start to look at those cupboards and start to look at the products, what the ingredients that's in all those things, and make some
well,
changes.
in the end, look, good microfiber cloths, a good vacuum cleaner, and dishwashing liquid do 90% of the work, and elbow grease.
Yes,
So
yeah.
that's really, and maybe a scouring pad, etc.
I've
But
got
yes,
one product that's been, he's a fella called Miracle 2. He's based here in Australia. That one product cleans my floors, my bathroom, my toilets, washes my dishes and washes my hands. And I love that on the actual bottle, he says that it's blessed by God. So it's wonderful. It's wonderful. But you're right. You can have just a few products that do everything that you need, haven't you?
absolutely, definitely. So really thinking about what products you're buying into the home. Things like air fresheners are a nightmare. They're often loaded with phthalates or hormone disrupting chemicals. They would definitely be on my list. Perfume, any products with perfume in it, unless it's an essential oil base. So
Mhm.
avoid perfumes, aftershaves, unless they're essential oil, or no fragrance. No air freshener is a big one. In fact, there was interesting research that came out that many of these chemicals, air fresheners in particular, and flame retardants in carpets, have dramatically increased the risk of thyroid disease in cats. Mm. So they found that, I had a lady come to do my building biology course, and I said, "Look, how did you find us?" She said, "Well, my cat." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, my cat has hypothyroidism. It affects 1 in 8 cats. It's a pandemic now. It didn't exist before this. And
Wow.
she said, the vet picked it up and said, "How old are your carpets? Are they relatively new?" And she said, "Yeah, they're about a year old." And she goes, "It's probably the flame retardant in the carpet that's causing this." There's actually data on this, and I'm doing a blog on that for my YouTube channel, that our cats could be warning us of our
Right.
toxic load.
Our animals are letting us know. Absolutely. My gosh, it's in your car. Well, I think my rule of thumb became anything that's extremely popular is probably the worst thing for us, right? Anything that's being marketed and pushed at us and it's really gaining popularity are usually the worst things that we could be using in our lives.
Yeah, well, I think if you look at baseline, it's going back to mimic nature. If you can mimic nature in your home, natural light instead of artificial light,
Mhm.
really important for a healthy home. Lighting is really important because you'll find a lot of the lights that are used really suppress melatonin, which is and can be quite an issue in terms of other health problems. So I tend to find it, I have subdued lighting, that's half blue light, even no blue light at night.
Yep.
During the day, I want full spectrum lighting because I want to stimulate my serotonin levels. But at night, I want to suppress serotonin and support melatonin so that the kids are more likely to get to bed earlier, etc. So the
Yes.
lighting is important. When you're looking at building materials, you're going back to basics where you can. Can we bring in wool, bamboo, cotton, all of those natural fibers? They're nicer. With regards to carpets, I don't have wall-to-wall carpets because my kids have allergies and dust mite allergies.
Mhm.
So I have hardwood floors that are naturally oiled, and then I'll have rugs made from natural materials that I would, launder every twice a year or so.
Mhm. Get back to basics.
Mm,
Get back to basics with everything.
mm.
Um, Tell me about Gosh, reproductive stuff, hormones and reproduction. What's happening in our home that's impacting that with us?
Okay, so you've got pesticides I mentioned. Some pesticides, like you have the organochlorines, which are now being banned, thankfully, but you have other pesticides that can also mimic the effect of estrogen in the body. Many of these chemicals mimic estrogen. They're called xenoestrogens or foreign estrogens.
Right.
The big ones are phthalates, and they're in your perfumes, in your air fresheners, so they're the ones that need to go.
Yes.
Um, Flame retardants can also act as endocrine disruptors as well, so they need to go. But the biggest one that is the big no in the house is vinyl. Vinyl contains phthalates, which of course can mimic estrogen, and it can, come out into the dust where it can be then ingested because the children's hand to mouth ratio is so much high because they're eating the dust and putting their hands in their mouth. That is a big problem, the vinyl for sure. And plastics, having your plastic food containers, heating plastics,
Oh,
freezing
yes.
plastics, all of those are going to be hormone disrupting chemicals. Well, the main ones will be polystyrene, vinyl, of course, is going to be a big one,
Yeah.
and some of your polycarbonate plastics that contain bisphenols.
What about our clothes? As I'm talking to you, I'm thinking that just applies to things that people are buying to wear.
Yeah. So it depends on the type. Not all plastics are going to be hormone disrupting chemicals. They're the main ones I mentioned: polystyrene, vinyl, polyvinyl chloride, and of course your bisphenols. A lot of your polyesters are not hormone disrupting chemicals,
Right.
so
Right.
that's less likely. But of course, the microfiber. The big issues with a lot of synthetic clothing is what's going down into the mains distribution system and out to the oceans is that microfiber. The plastics that's coming off our clothes is a huge issue for the aquatic life.
Yes. Yes, I hear you. Tell me about our drinking water, please. People need to
Yes.
know what's going on with our drinking
Yeah.
water.
So drinking water is an interesting one. I remember doing a couple, 8 years at uni and going, we haven't focused on drinking water, which is ridiculous because we've done so much on herbal medicine, homeopathy, and nutrition. Drinking water is so important. It's one of the major sources of toxicity that people are going to be exposed to. So, because to get it clean, they have to add a lot of chemicals, which is an oxymoron, right? Um,
Yes.
Chlorine, of course, helps prevent, and it's all about risk. So, chlorine is going to significantly reduce waterborne illnesses like cholera and all of those waterborne illnesses, which we don't want, of course, because they're
Yeah.
life threatening, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But needs to be enough chlorine in the distribution system by the time it comes out of your tap that it's still active. Now, chlorine is the strongest antibacterial chemical that we have. If you ingest chlorinated water, what impact does it have on your gut microbiome,
Well,
which is the most important
it's going to
marker for
it's going
health?
to kill off the good and the bad, isn't it?
Yes, probably yes. So this is why I'd say for no other reason, just to simplify it, you must have a water filter to remove that chlorine
Mm.
out of the supply because it is not meant to be drinking chlorinated water.
Yes.
You need a healthy gut microbiome, and chlorine is one of the strongest antibacterials that you're ever going to ingest. So what's the point in taking a $40 probiotic, drinking it with chlorinated water that's going to kill some of it on the way down? Like
Yes.
it
Yes.
just doesn't make sense. And when I say that to naturopaths, I go, oh my God, that's so obvious. Why didn't we learn this? Yeah.
Mm.
So water filter is important for that. But there are other things in the water supply. So fluoride is not found in most of the world's drinking water supply. And in Europe, it was prevented from being in the water supply because it was unethical to mass medicate an entire population with a pharmaceutical drug. So fluoride is a drug. It is used to treat tooth decay, and therefore it is a pharmaceutical drug. So to put a pharmaceutical drug into the water supply without the doctor analyzing or determining if that patient needs it,
Yes.
without the person's permission, is actually not ethical. And that was the reason why most of Europe did not ever fluoridate their water supply. And their tooth decay rates are no different to our tooth decay rates. So the premise that it helps teeth is false. In fact, it displaces calcium, and there's more likely to be osteoarthritis and hip dysplasias as a result of the displacement of calcium with fluoride because it has a higher affinity. So, however, Where there is evidence to suggest it prevents tooth decay is when it's applied topically in the form of toothpaste, that it may prevent tooth decay when it's on.
Yes.
But the other issue with fluoride is that it's a byproduct from the phosphate fertilizer industry and aluminium industry, and it contains many other very toxic atoms and radioactive nuclides. So from that avenue alone, you want a clean fluoride supply. If we could get calcium fluoride or something naturally from the ground, not a byproduct from toxic waste,
Yes.
to toothpaste, that's I would definitely
And
recommend.
also what I'm hearing too is dosage. Like if they're, putting it in the water and stuff, nobody knows what sort of dosage of it they're getting
Exactly.
either, and they don't have any
Exactly.
control over that.
That's right. And the only way to get it out really is either an activated alumina filter, which I don't like aluminium, or reverse osmosis. So reverse
Yes.
osmosis will be one of the most effective ways to remove it from the water supply, and will remove all the toxic metals, etc. So other problems or hazards in the water supply include copper. If you've recently laid copper into your domestic reticulation system, it will tend to, as it's not corroding, but as it's oxidizing and forming that dark layer, it will be releasing more copper ions in the first 3 years. But copper is really great water, in terms of pipes, because it's going to last 30, 40 years, right? Not like the plastic
Well,
stuff we
that's where
put
we
in.
came from. We came from copper piping once upon a time, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah. Also, all the flexi hoses we now have instead of copper pipe. Flexi hose is that flexible hose under the basins. You will find that's the number one cause of water events, and costing over $320 million dollars in insurance claims every year, causing massive mold problems in many people's homes. So,
What do you mean by water events?
so where it's split and suddenly there's a massive water event
Oh,
and bulk water that's
right.
resulted in a water overflow and a flood in the house, which has now resulted in microbial growth and mold. So it's the number one cause of flood events in domestic homes.
And mold, interesting enough, I'm finding that when I stopped using a lot of those chemical-based products and stuff in my home, I had less mold in the shower and less mold in the sinks and things like that. Where does it come from?
So the mold spores are everywhere from the Arctic to the Antarctica. They're meant to be there because they're nature's greatest decomposers. The
They are.
type of mold you find in a water damaged home is very specific, regardless of whether you're in Tasmania or Oslo or Russia. It's the same. So once moisture is present for more than 48 hours, you're going to have microbial growth where the spores already sitting on the surface in your home will start to branch out like filaments. That's why we call it filamentous fungi. It's not like mushrooms we eat. It's not like yeasts in probiotic, which are type of fungi. This is filamentous fungi, and it's like branch-like that spreads very quickly in a short period of time because its function is to decompose your house. So
Yes.
in the presence of moisture, it will start to form these mycelium. Within 72 hours, it'll start to infiltrate into the substrate and release more fungal particulate, depending on other factors. So then it starts to spread the spores throughout other areas. If you're exposed to high settled spores in the millions, which you cannot see, by the time you see mold, you're looking at 40, 50 million spores per centimetre squared or so. So it's what you can't see that can cause devastating health effects. And that's the issue with a lot of the homes I'm testing is some of the worst homes I can't see or smell mold, neither can the client, but the sampling data is really bad.
You're absolutely right in terms of it breaking down the body. Its job is to do that. In nature, you see it. When trees are losing their leaves at this time of year, you can smell that mold under the tree where all the leaves are. I see it on my plants. I see it on the actual, I've got terracotta pots. You see the mold that starts there. It's just an alert system telling me I need to address the plant because the mold is starting to break down the plant because there's issues going on. Yeah.
Well, it's meant to break down that leaf litter, the organic matter. That's what
Yes.
it's meant to do. Otherwise, we would be 5 stories high in leaf matter without fungi. Fungi play a very important role in the ecosystem. They
Yeah.
help plants and trees communicate in forests. They alert, they become like the messenger between the bug killing the tree and the rest of the trees in the forest. It's incredible. There's a fantastic documentary on this called Fantastic Fungi, well worth watching. It
Yes.
gives you different understanding of mold. I love fungi. It really challenges me on every level. I've learned to keep my mouth closed when I'm testing water damage homes, because what I think's going on, what's actually going on without data, I'm flying blind. So it is, what you want to do is create an environment that doesn't support its growth, and the limiting factor there is going to be the moisture. So if you live in a humid environment where it's more than 75% humidity, for days, weeks on end, you're going to support microbial growth of the spores in the dust. So you have to have good dust management. If you live in Sydney, Central Coast, Queensland, you really need to make sure you're dusting your house weekly, because the dust will have spores on it naturally, and
Yep.
it will utilize the water vapor in the air if the humidity levels are too high to start growing. Now, it will be limited by the amount of dust on the surface, but if you have a lot of dust and a lot of humidity, then you're going to have, might increase microbial growth. The biggest risk factors for mold aren't the mold in the grout of the shower. Everyone's got that. It's not the mold on the window. The only reason why you get mold on the window is if it's a single pane window in an old house where you've got water vapor hitting a cold surface and condensing, and then it's dirt. Mold doesn't grow on non-porous items like plastics, metal, glass, windows. Doesn't do so well on bricks and things like that, tiles. But if they're dirty and there's moisture, it will. So that's, good housekeeping becomes
Keep it
really
clean.
important.
Keep it clean. Absolutely.
Absolutely, it's important. And the greatest risk for health problems from mold, from my experience, is, those roof leaks, the drainage issues that aren't being fixed. It will be steam cleaning carpets, a nightmare, because when you get items like carpets wet and they're not drying within hours, you start getting microbial growth. And when you stand on those carpets, it becomes a plume of fungal particulate that you can't see. So
Right.
the worst risks where people end up with the chronic fatigue-like symptoms will be wet carpets or wet plasterboard, where they can't, you can't see it. You need moisture meters to identify it. You need to check, where's the leak coming from? Is it liquid water or is it water vapor?
Mhm.
And therefore, address that as fast as possible.
So you're putting mold together with chronic fatigue.
It's the number one cause of chronic fatigue from my experience in the last 30 years, with no doubt
Wow.
about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
How is that causing chronic fatigue in the body then?
So mold affects the body in three ways. It can cause a true allergy, which is IgE mediated. So you go to get allergy tested with a panel, the RAS test, for example, and then they'll test, are you allergic to mold, to
So an
create these
allergy can
items.
even be, sorry to interrupt there, but can it be an allergy can be a skin condition?
Yes, so you can end up with eczema. Yeah, absolutely. There's
Yep.
many items, nickel, etc., that can cause allergies. For mold, it'll be asthma, hay
Yep.
fever. They'll be the most common. So the majority of asthmatics will be sensitive to mold or have an allergy to mold.
Mm.
Hay fever, that's all year round. If it's in your house, it's not season related. So that's how we'll differentiate. Okay, it could be mold? Well, we'd expect it all year round.
Mm.
Um, the other symptoms it can cause infection and colonization. So if you're living in a damp environment where there's persistent moisture, often that you can't see, what healthy people get is upper or lower respiratory tract infections that are persistent, ongoing, and they
Yep.
keep coming back. So it's normal to get colds and flus a year, of course, but when it starts happening all the time and dragging on for weeks or months, where it
Cycles.
doesn't respond
Mm.
to treatment and it comes back, that's always a key for us to check, is there actually mold in this environment, whether it's school, workplace, car, or the
Which then
home.
also tells me that what's the point in getting medicated for it if you're not dealing with the cause and what's going on in your home?
That's why these people don't get better. So they get these symptoms. And so that's the second way, infection and colonization. Colonization in the upper sinuses, resulting in, many symptoms, but chronic sinusitis, tonsillitis, pharyngitis, bronchitis, all the itises that are
Yes.
persistent and keep coming back, and pneumonia. I had quite a lot of patients with pneumonia hospitalized, where occasionally they'll identify they've got better in hospital, go back, they're sick, and then, most of the time they're not identifying the cause of that problem, which is unfortunate and, of course, life-threatening. The third way it can affect the body, which results in fatigue syndrome, is when people have a certain genetic makeup, and this can be either in the immune response genes on chromosome 6, which means how their immune system reacts to the mold is different to most people. Instead of identifying it and encapsulating it and removing it, it's actually setting up an inflammatory response, which doesn't stop.
Yep.
So the way they're reacting to the mold ends up with brain on fire. So essentially it's affecting and suppressing key neurotransmitters, melanocyte stimulating hormone, vasoactive intestinal polypeptide in the brain, and then it's having far-reaching effects on every system. So they end up with sleep disturbances, they end up with pain wandering around the body, they end up with brain fog, poor concentration, poor memory, missing words mid-sentence, fibromyalgia, weakness of the muscles. They start urinating a lot more, they start drinking a lot more, but they're not diabetic when they're tested.
Right,
That
right.
it could be actually mold.
Yep.
So it's shutting down the entire system through inflammation. And because the inflammation is persisting and they can't get over infections and yeasts, they start getting these infections in the upper sinuses, in the vaginal area, in the gut. And the byproducts of these infections are causing traffic jams in the liver, which then results in more chemical sensitivities, more mental health problems, because the pathway in the liver we call phase 2 glucuronidation is so important for excreting and detoxing neurotransmitters, serotonin, melatonin. So over time, these patients literally go mad. Brain fog, pre-Alzheimer's brain, a mold rage. It's like they're not them anymore
Right.
because their detoxification capacity is compromised. So their perfume they can't wear anymore because they start reacting, they get migraines or headaches. And the
Yes.
reason is the byproducts of the mold and the infections in the body is blocking the liver detox, which means other things can't get through.
Yes.
And so it's perpetuating and
So
it's
it's like their whole body is toxic and there's no
inflamed.
exit. There's no exit pathway at all.
So the way they treat them is first you've got to get them out of that environment. Because if the trigger's there, the supplements help, but they're not going to cure the problem. So
Yes.
they have to get out of that environment. And the problem is some of the worst homes I see, I can't see or smell it. So the key for me is the history, which is what month of what year did things go pear-shaped for you? What was going on in your life at the time in terms of stress, relationships, work?
Yep.
What about chemical exposure? What about, EMFs? What about when you moved house?
Right.
How long have you been in this home?
Yes.
You've been here 20 years. Have you had a bathroom reno? Oh, yeah, we did 3 years ago. Well, that's interesting because two and
Yeah.
a half years ago, you got really sick. Bathroom renos are a big issue sometimes because if there's mold hidden in the wall assembly and they strip it to frame, they could cross-contaminate rooms, if not the entire house, by dragging that material through the house.
Well,
And that
also
can be
what
a
I'm
big
hearing
problem.
is they need someone like you to come in and start asking them some questions because if you're compromised to that degree that you've got brain fog, you can't think straight, you can't operate straight, you can't even think your way through the problem
No.
you've got.
That's exactly right. And taking a history is difficult, which is why I do my histories on Zoom with a partner or someone who's living with them in the home because they're very forgetful. They forget key information that is
Right.
helpful as part of the assessment process.
Yes. Yeah. And just for everybody listening, that is part of what you do. You do, personal investigations into people's homes and consultations, but you've also got courses there as well. Boy, I mean, we've only been going for 40 minutes here, and there's an enormous amount of information for people to digest, right? But you also do courses that they can come along. How do your courses work?
Yes. So I'm about to launch courses for consumers on getting their head around mold and helping them educate about, good information about what causes mold in the home, how to prevent it, and more importantly, how to clean it. A lot of what's on social media is misinformation
Mm,
that can cause more harm in many cases. Use of bleach, clove oil is completely unfounded and not effective. So really understanding what's causing the mold is important and how to prevent it, how to have things in the house to actually prevent these issues going on, monitoring humidity levels in those areas like your bathrooms and laundry and kitchens to see what's going on and whether
yeah.
it's increasing the risk.
Yeah.
So all of these things, it's really putting it together to help people really understand that. But I also been running the Australian College of Environmental Studies since '99. It's a registered training organisation and provides the only nationally accredited training in building biology, mould testing, electromagnetic field testing, even geopathic stress in Australia. So it's been a privilege to teach so many people and trades coming through,
Yep.
learning from them, because
Oh,
I'm
the
not a
tradies.
builder.
Good. Yeah.
So they're my major cohort are restorers, plumbers, remediators,
Great.
hygienists. But 75% of our building biologists are women, mature age females, which I love that. You know, we're the highest in building construction cohort, predominantly women in a building construction field. So, it's good when they come through the course and then they're telling the trades, actually, you're not doing your job right. This is what you need to be doing in terms of preventing condensation and moisture, reducing electromagnetic field exposures, etc., working in collaboration with the other trades.
Well, what's a couple of things that we can do to reduce the mold aspect? Because as I'm talking to you, I've got red flags going off about actually where I live.
Yes. So in terms of mold, first get to the moisture. The first question I say to my mold testing technician or IEPs, indoor environmental professionals, is where's the moisture? Without moisture, there's no microbial growth. So is it water vapor or is it liquid water? So is there a roof leak? Is there a plumbing leak in the wall? Is there, so we use things like thermal imaging cameras, moisture meters to identify moisture.
Yep.
So the history, we ask the client in detail, tell us about the history of any leaks or floods or weather events or drainage problems. During a heavy rain event, where does water pool around your house? Get outside in those really heavy rain events and look at how does your house cope. It tells us where the weak points are.
Yep.
That's really important.
Yeah. Because
Also,
also,
context.
oh, sorry, you can smell it. You can smell it. Mold is really quite sweet. Well, it's similar to what the leaves under a tree smell like when they're all decomposing. It's got that kind of musty, sweet smell.
Damp, musty smell, exactly. And that smell is indicating it's growing. So that is one of the most important markers when you're testing water damaged buildings. Is there an odor? Because the odor is saying where it's growing. And the odor is created, it's called microbial volatile organic compounds, MVOCs, or fungi farts. And essentially, they are growing, they are emitting that to kill off their competitors. Now, when mold grows, it's emitting some of the most deadliest chemicals known to man in the form of mycotoxins. When you breathe them in, over a long time, you're shutting down protein production. Your muscles start to waste. Your liver starts to shut down. Your kidneys start to fail. And that's the worst case scenario for these patients in chronically damp environments.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Everybody out there, just start taking note. I want everybody out there looking around their home and looking at how they're working with their computers. Going like I hardwired my computer as soon as I got an EMF meter and went around the home and amazed myself at the readings that I was getting. I then went into a work environment where I was, and the fellow I was working with wanted to take it home and he wanted to go and do his house as well. And it just went from there. Everyone needs to start looking at the Internet of Things in their home, because all of those things are transmitting signals all over the place, which is interfering with our central nervous system and our electronic field. And they need to start looking like you've just been talking about mold. What's
Yeah,
going on?
absolutely. Look, you said at the beginning, tell us about 5G. Well, the difference in the frequency as we go up the electromagnetic spectrum, the waves get shorter, so they're more likely
Correct.
to impact more the surface of the body.
Yes.
Um, but what it's doing, regardless of the frequency field, it's impacting voltage-gated ion channels on all the cell membranes, especially those in the brain, the heart, and the testicles. And it's causing a influx of calcium ions, oxidative stress, and then potentially other downstream effects like cell death, for example, in the worst case scenario. So
Sorry,
the man,
just for 1 second there. Brain, heart, and testes.
It's where these voltage gated ion channels are at their highest. That's where electromagnetic fields tend to target the most. So a lot of the symptoms associated with electromagnetic sensitivity tend to be palpitations, POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia, so getting up and having that rapid heartbeat, although that could be due to mold as well.
Yeah.
But headaches, tinnitus is very common in long-standing EMF related issues. So ringing in the ears,
Yep.
headaches, sleep disturbances, palpitations. One of the most common signs of mold, EMFs, but they can also get the brain fog. So poor
Yep.
concentration, poor memory as well. So mold and EMFs have about 80% identical symptoms. And once they become mold sensitive, because of its impact on myelin, it dramatically escalates people's sensitivity to electrical fields. So what we find is if someone is mold sensitive, they're likely to be chemically and electrically sensitive because the system's shutting down.
Gotcha.
Mm.
You know, this stuff just creeps up on us, right? We've gone from a couple of generations ago being very natural in the way that we lived and our environment. All of these things we're talking about has crept up on us slowly. And human beings, we are incredibly adaptable. Incredibly adaptable. We just adjust and adjust for the toxicity and the pollution, and here we are now.
And I guess the issue is it's happened so fast in terms of our evolution that we haven't had time to adapt. And we're seeing this in our children. Children, when you're exposed during critical windows of development, these pesticides, these electromagnetic fields, these, mold biotoxins in damp homes, is devastating.
Yeah.
We are in a pandemic of neurodevelopmental disorders that has never been seen before
Right.
prior to the 50s.
Yep.
So something is dramatically happening. Fertility, like I used to joke 30 years ago to my naturopaths when I was lecturing at university, it's not going to be the nuclear bomb that wipes us out. It will be infertility
Mm.
because you cannot introduce hormone disrupting chemicals
Right.
into the population,
Yep.
especially in critical windows of development during in utero. So it's like thalidomide. When the woman took thalidomide in pregnancy, it didn't affect her, it affected her child
Yeah.
and resulted in phycomelia and loss of limbs. It wasn't the mother that was impacted by it, it was the child during a critical window of development. And that's the problem. We are in a pandemic, we are sicker, we're living longer, but we are sicker. And
Yes.
the source of many of these exposures is obvious once you look at the data,
Mm.
which is, Parkinson's in paraquat, which keeps being reapproved. Like pesticides are a nightmare. Glyphosate, these are affecting the genes,
Mm.
especially in utero, and it's having devastating impacts on human health. So, we need to act because our water supplies are already contaminated. They're full of microplastics. We're drinking our own plastics. We're breathing our own, garbage that we've been burning or it's getting into the water supply. I mean, if we don't act on a much larger scale together,
Yep.
then we're at a point where, okay, let's get rid of this planet and get on to the next and
Yeah.
see which other planet we can get rid of. It's ridiculous. It's like this is a global phenomenon as equally as important as climate change, probably more because it's already here.
More because, yeah, our environment is killing us now.
It's certainly having dramatic impacts on human health. And animal welfare as well.
Yeah.
Rachel Carson was the first to introduce, looking at, the impact of pesticides on the bald eagle, for example, and as a result of her work, started the US EPA. But there are problems when the system is not being funded, where industry are getting a hand in the system, where they're influencing exposure standards, and
Yep.
that's why I wrote this in my dissertation about the impact of environmental exposures on chronic diseases and, where the problems are. And really it comes down to dividends for shareholders and industry having a hand in exposure standards. It's not about public health.
Well, now we're talking about what I really loved on your website when I found this. So I put the page up on its own here. The four dog defense.
Yes.
I love that. Now you're talking about that. Firstly, it's about awareness, people. Be aware of everything Nicole's been talking about and start looking at it in your own environment. But please, Nicole, tell us about the four dog defense. I love it.
All right. I probably can't remember the top of my head, but I think ones. My dog doesn't bite, right?
My dog
So
doesn't bite is the first one. Yes.
yeah, my dog doesn't bite. So essentially, industry is saying my product isn't going to harm you. And the interesting thing about that is they don't have to provide evidence to say it's safe. So the burden of proof is on researchers to show over a lifetime there is a problem because they can release it without any requirements to prove safety. Now, fortunately, with the publication of the REACH directive in the US, in Europe, and there was a act, of course, in the US Toxic Substance Control Act, I think it was, that requires manufacturers to say, actually, we do need some data before you bring it in. There's still a lot of problems with those because there has been legislation to try and fix this system, but it's still very broken. But essentially, manufacturers don't really need to provide a lot of evidence to show that their products are safe, so they can just completely deny it in
Yes,
the
and
first
then they get their
place.
own researchers to manufacture the paperwork to say that it is okay.
Well, publication bias is a big problem with research. Is essentially, if you've got unlimited resources to do as much research, you can do 10 studies. And if eight said, this drug doesn't work, but two said there's marginal impacts where it could, they're not going to publish the eight that said no.
Yep,
So they're not all published. It's
yep,
publication bias.
yep.
Having done a PhD, how you ask the question can almost influence the response. So this is where, research isn't what people think it is. I mean, it's fantastic and a lot of research is great as long as you don't step on big toes. Okay,
Yeah,
so do research as long as the outcome is going to support the person whoever funded you in the end. A lot of people in electromagnetic fields lost their funding because telecommunications are putting their pressure on journals, and I know that firsthand because I did one of the first real world study on the impact of Wi-Fi on sleep. It was a 4-week randomized control trial, crossover pilot study, where I got 12 healthy adults. That was difficult finding 12 healthy adults in Melbourne, but anyway, who slept well, that weren't menopause, that weren't pregnant, that were happy not to drink coffee after 3, that had low EMFs in their homes, right? When I looked at the data to come up with my research, I realized that there'd been no real world studies. Almost every study in electromagnetic fields is done in a simulated laboratory under laboratory conditions, which is ridiculous because it doesn't reflect real world conditions. And the reason why that's difficult is because there's so many other confounding factors that you have to adjust for, which would almost be like, well, if you did a study like that, they'll probably not even publish it because they can just say these other things could have influenced it, right? So
yep,
knowing that and having done EMF testing for a long time and teaching it, I knew what sort of things to look for. And I had 3 professors, 2 of which were sleep professors, about, making sure that the people we chose to get into the study weren't going to, didn't have things that could cause sleep disturbances. So essentially it was 4 weeks. First week I did baseline. So I literally, at the end of the 7 nights, checked their EEG, their heart rate variability, movement in bed. They had to wear a watch for that, and do sleep diaries. The second week, I introduced a baby monitor into their bedroom, and at the end of that, so that was double blind. So I didn't know if the baby monitor was on or off, right? Then we did it again. We measured the EEG next morning, the heart rate variability, actigraphy, movement in bed, and sleep diaries. Third week was washout, nothing. And then we measured those parameters again. And the 4th week, the baby monitor came in again. So during one of those weeks, the baby monitor was on and the baby monitor was off. So it was
yep,
double blind.
yep.
And it was nerve-wracking because I remember my supervisor, Mark Cohen, said to me, Cole, what do you see a lot as a building biologist in the field? And I said, well, if people sleep with Wi-Fi enabled devices, they don't sleep. We all know that as building biologists. He said, but no one else knows it because it's not in the research. Stick it in there. So I went, okay, let's do this study. Anyway, so the data came back and it's nerve-wracking because I'm going, this is what I'm seeing. Is it going to show up anything after 7 nights with a
Give me
baby monitor?
evidence. Give me evidence. Yeah.
Yeah. And my 2 sleep professors went, oh my God, the evidence, it was there. It impacted non-REM sleep in the brain waves. And it also affected the sleep diary. So we had subjective and objective changes after 7 nights with a baby monitor next to their head, next on the bedside table.
Right.
I submitted it to a journal. It was rejected. It was rejected by 10 journals. Some kept it for 8 months, knowing I couldn't submit it. And often some of the reasons were there's not enough participants in this study. So to hold my study for 8 months and then reject it, to say there's not enough participants, if it's statistically significant, there were enough participants, right? So
Yes.
my two professors are going, they don't want to publish this. They don't want to publish
So it's
this.
not even corporate or industry that's actually blocking these things. It's the tentacles that lead into university and other organizations as well that are all blocking the
Universities are corporatized. Universities are corporatized. The government should pull all industry funding and support funding so it's completely no conflict of interest. That's what should happen, but it
yeah.
doesn't happen. It's been corporate. CSIRO is corporatized.
Yes.
Like, and that's why I say at medical conferences, evidence-based medicine is a furphy because, when you look at what's really going on behind the scenes, especially in controversial areas like electromagnetic field research, it's bullshit. It's
It's
just,
unfortunate because it's just not focused on health. It's focused on
no.
money. And
Yes, of
yeah,
course, an outcome and a drug or something like that. So fortunately, eventually it did get published. I think it's had about 30,000 views now in the last 6 7 months.
congratulations. Hmm.
Yeah. So it did get published, which was really good. But it's like a career killer. You're not going to stay at uni and get funding.
Isn't it
There's
sad?
something.
Isn't it
mm,
sad when you're pioneering something like you are and you're finding the truth about things,
yep.
and then you have to come on shows like mine or you have to, get it out through other avenues to be able to educate the people.
Exactly right. So this is where I realized 30 years ago, the revolution doesn't happen from the top down. It happens from the ground up. And
Yes.
that's why I started the building biology industry in Australia in healthy homes and educate. So my graduates are the heroes here because they're the ones going out into the homes, educating people how to make better informed choices about the products they get and how to create these homes.
Yeah. So with a couple of minutes to go, number two. So the first one was my dog doesn't bite. The second one is my dog bites, but it didn't bite you.
Yes. So they're saying that you didn't get exposed. So even though I guess the challenge there is, showing that, yeah, it is there and it can cause health effects, but it actually didn't affect you. So why complain, so to speak?
Okay. Got it. And
Mm,
then the third one is my dog bit you, but it didn't hurt you.
that's right. So it's within exposure standards. So yeah, you're exposed, and it's in your body, but it's not affecting you because it's within exposure standards. But they don't realize the
You're still
exposure standards.
alive. So what's the problem?
Exactly right. And the exposure standards are not health-based standards, right? So they're saying, yes, you're exposed, but big deal, there's no risk.
Yeah, yeah. And having said that, I just want to put out there to everybody right now. I was watching someone the other day with their mobile phone up on their head talking on the phone, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, 10 years ago, like, there was a whole heap of people talking about don't do that because people were getting brain tumors and all sorts of things. And it's like everyone's just forgotten. They've just forgotten.
Mm.
This one, last one. My dog bit you and it hurt you, but it wasn't my fault.
That's right, because we warned you with the photos on the cigarette packets, don't buy our product, but you chose to buy our product and we warned you there was harm. We warned you with your cell phone not to put it near your person. It's in the settings if you can find it. We
Yep.
warned you. So don't, you can't sue us because we warned you that our product could increase that risk.
This is just crazy, right? When I had teenage kids, I'll never forget, there was some song that some rapper put out, and part of the lyrics were, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. So he got caught doing this and caught doing that. It wasn't me. So my kids actually picked up that phrase and they started using that with me as well. And what you're talking about here is that that's what corporate and industry are doing. They're going, it wasn't me.
Yeah,
What do
I
we
know.
do?
Doesn't work. And look, the real issue that should be done is what's the cost risk benefit analysis of the real cost on the Medicare system by not addressing those issues. I think they're realizing it needs to be done
Yeah.
because the cost of not having healthy housing, special social housing, where people are poor, now they're staying in the environments where they're moldy. Now the kids can't go to school and staying where it's moldy, and now the whole forget the academics. It's the real cost
Yep.
is huge. It's
Yep.
obvious to me, but it needs to be done for the actuaries and the accountants for the government to move on this.
But again, you're
Um,
talking about the top making some changes, and we're back to they just won't, because if they can have everyone reliant on the health system and Medicare and stuff, they're not really too fussed about that either.
well, I'm hopeful there must be some politicians that do care, but
Back to
I
back
think
to
I'm
us.
in Victoria, so I've been burnt badly by this.
I bet you
But
have.
let's not go there. I can't mention his name or her name. I'm not going to say anything.
No.
Zip it.
But oh my gosh, we're up for time. Like that's just flown. And like I could listen to you for a long, long time. Um, Thank you so much, Nicole. You are a wealth of information and you are doing incredible things to help all of us with our health and well-being. I hope everybody goes away now and they can have a look at your website. They can contact you if they want consultation with you, or that you've got courses that are there. They can look into that. But also, there's a wealth of information just for people to read through and start to educate themselves, because everybody should be looking at this stuff, shouldn't they?
Well, I think so. If you're not well or if you want to maintain really good health, absolutely. There's simple things you can do. Yep. And I'm looking forward to finally publishing the fourth edition of my book because it's been out of print for 6 years,
Yeah.
towards the end of the year. So that'll be a really good one.
We've got something to look forward to. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for your time. Thank you so much for what you're doing for our world. Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks, Helen.